that show you just how miraculous life can be if we learn how to let it be and we learn how to cooperate with that. And that hopefully also are stories that provide some insight from things that I've learned when I have allowed life to be miraculous for me. Some things are kind of hard to learn if most people aren't having those experiences. Nobody's writing about it, nobody's teaching it in schools, nobody's just talking about it in general conversation because people aren't having the experience, right? So there's a certain element when I share these stories, I also want to share with you the incredibly valuable and unique things I learned about the nature of this reality just from having these experiences. So today, hold on to your hats. Today, this one is pretty profound. I think you can tell just from the intro text that I wrote there that this is going to be pretty intense. And it actually took me more than a decade. It took me actually almost 20 years to fully process the lesson of this story, because the lesson of it ran so counter to everything that I had been taught as a child, and so much of what gets reinforced in the teachings throughout our society, not just my family. It was so counter to that it really took a long time and a lot of struggle and a lot of my trying to figure it out and talking to different people about it, especially talking to different spiritual teachers about it, before I could make any sense of it. So I'm going to share that with you today, and I hope that it doesn't take you 20 years. I hope that you're able to kind of let in the lesson of this story more quickly than that. But if not, then not. That's fine too, right? But I'm going to share it with you, and then you do with it as you will. Okay, so go back, what was it, 1998 into 1999. Okay. So what had happened is in 1998, I was here in California and I was getting ready to go to Bali. And I had already given up my apartment and sold my belongings. And that was the money I was going to use to, live in Bali. But I was quitting my job, and I didn't think in my mind, I was never going to have another regular job with regular health insurance again. That didn't turn out to be the case. But that was how I felt about how I was going off to Bali. And so I went to do some medical stuff with the last of my insurance, and turned out I had a really large fibroid tumor, totally benign, but it was going to cause me problems. Like the doctor said, look, if you don't think you're going to have insurance again for years, this probably can't wait years. We should go ahead and do surgery and remove it now. So I'd already given up my place, and so this was around Christmas time. This was like maybe a week or two before Christmas. And I had the surgery, and then some friends, all my friends back then, we were still young enough that everybody was focused on their family of origin, and we all came from back east. So at Christmas time, all my friends in San Francisco, excuse me, I totally need some water. Please forgive me. I didn't bring my water over. Hold on one sec. A little parched. So all my friends in San Francisco had left and gone back east, and I was staying in somebody else's house without them there. So I was just like totally, completely alone, and also bedridden because I had only had surgery like a week or two before that, right? So I'm sitting by myself. I had started feeling a little bit better by the time Christmas came around, but I still was just completely alone. And so I had recently read this book about female saints. And one of those women, it turned out, was going to be about a 90-minute drive from where I was. Not even 90 minutes, like 45 minutes, a 45-minute drive from my friend's house I was staying at while they were away. And so I said, you know what? I'm all by myself on Christmas. I'm interested in all these women saints. I'm going to go and check her out. She's come all the way here from wherever, a 45-minute drive. Why not? So I get there, and it's so many people. It's like I don't even know, like thousands of people. And so I go in, and she's a Hindu woman. And I wasn't Hindu or anything. I wasn't really any faith at all at the time, honestly. But I was like, hey, saint. I'm interested, right? So I go in, and at the door, the woman asked me, have you ever seen her before? And I said, no, I just read about her in a book. And I'm by myself on Christmas, so I figured I'd come and see her. And they said, okay. And so they sat me right up front. And then there were two other sisters who a few minutes later, they came over and sat with me. And I think the woman at the door, which was a white lady, I think she sent those two sisters. I think she said, look, she's new. You go sit with her. I really do. Because they came over and they sat beside me and they immediately started talking to me. And they took care of me that whole day. Like because I didn't know what was going on. I really didn't know what was going on. And so they kind of just like took me under their wing. And so one of the things that happened, there were a few pretty amazing. Hey, Nima, good to see you. Oh, hey, Michelle, good to see you too. I just saw your name there. One of the things that I'm just trying to decide inside of me if I'm going to tell this little sub story. I'll see if I can do it without getting emotional. So I'm going to try to tell this story. So when I was growing up, because of my family's religion, I didn't get to have things like birthdays and Christmas and stuff like that. So I never had those experiences. And so there was this one song, I remember when I was like in maybe third grade, they had played Christmas songs in school. And there was this one song that I loved so much. But then the songs play one after another after another. So by the time the songs ended, so I could talk to my teacher, I wanted to say, what was that song? And I wanted to say the one I loved and find out what it was. But of course, I had no way of indicating which song I was talking about, right? So I never knew. And so for years, I mean, from like second or third grade, something like that, all across the years, at this point I was like 30, I never knew what that song was. I never actually heard it again. And the teacher walks in, and that's the song they start playing. I started crying. Like, hey, Shauna, good to see you. Like, I just started just absolutely sobbing. That was my one favorite Christmas song. And it felt like they were playing it just for me. And my life up to that point, that 10 years had been unbelievably hard, which was why I was going to Bali. And so I didn't realize that I felt rejected by God, but I did. Life had been so hard for so long that I felt deeply and completely unloved. And then they started singing that song. And not only is it a beautiful song, turns out the name of the song is Carol of the Bells, which I'm sure is the song that you know. I'm sure you know exactly the song I'm thinking of, but I didn't know what it was. So they started singing Carol of the Bells, and it felt like God was singing to me. And God was saying, I love you. I've always loved you. And so I started crying, I just sobbing. And so because I was new, where they had sat me up front, it just so happened they sat me right between the cameras. So which she was broadcasting all over the world. So the teacher, when she would teach, she would spend a lot of time looking right at me because she was looking at the cameras that were like bookending me, right? Just like a couple rows up from me. So when I started crying, and I couldn't stop crying. Like I wasn't just crying a little bit. Like I easily sobbed for 15 minutes. And I kept trying to stop, like trying to suppress it. But then it would just hit me again. Oh, God loves me. And I would start boohoo crying again. And so finally the singing stopped and the teacher started teaching, and she just kept staring at me. And I couldn't tell, is she really looking at me, or is she looking at the cameras that are right around me, right? And then she started speaking, and she said these exact words. I still remember all these years later. She said, just a glance of compassion from the eye of the guru can change your entire life. And then she would say that, and she would look around, and she would look around. And then she said that like maybe 5 times. But several of the times she was looking right at me, probably because she wanted to speak to those cameras and all the people who were watching through those cameras, right? But I got the transmission, like it was like poof. And then, so we go through the whole service and everything. It was really nice. It was a very, very pleasant talk and different things. And then the women that I was with, they said, hey, there's an altar there. And do you mind if before we go to lunch, if we go over to the altar? And I'm like, sure, I'm hanging with you guys, wherever you going, I'll go. So we go over to this line, and we're just chatting a little bit in the line, and we're moving up. And I can't remember. Yeah, they were ahead of me in the line, but then there was also like this tall guy ahead of me, like between them. Somehow I couldn't see from behind the sky. So I didn't really know what they had done. Like when they went up to altar, I didn't know what was going on. So I'm just in the line because they're in the line. And then I get up to the top front. It's my turn. And I'm at the altar. And there's this beautiful, all the little pretty things on an altar. And then there are a pair of flip-flops on the altar. Like right in the middle of the altar is a pair of flip-flops. And not brand new ones either. Like old, haggard looking flip-flops. And I'm thinking, who put these shoes in the middle of this beautiful altar? What were they thinking? But I had this irresistible urge. Like I so badly felt like I wanted to put my head on the shoes. Like it was such a strong urge. And then of course I start criticizing myself. Like, what's wrong with you? Why would you want to do that, Indigo? Like, why would you? This beautiful altar, it's bad enough there's shoes here, but you want to put your head on the shoes? What's wrong with you? But I didn't know what to do. I'm just standing there. And then the people behind me, I could hear them starting to get restless. So I was like, okay, I've obviously used up my time. So I started to walk away, but I just could not take my eyes off those shoes. And so something in me, I could not stop myself. My hand went out and I just touched the shoes. And when I did, something ran up my finger, up my arm, into my heart. And the next thing I knew, I was running across the floor, shaking my hands like this, totally freaked, like out of my mind. It blew my mind. Through my heart, it blew my mind. And so I run over to the sisters, and they're like, chill, right? I apparently was the only one that had that experience up at the altar. But I'm like, ah! And they're like, you want to go to lunch? And I'm like, yes! I mean, I was totally blown, okay? So we go to lunch, and it was like, I couldn't stop talking about the food. Everything I ate was the most delicious thing I'd ever eaten in my life. I couldn't believe, and it was simple food. It was like a vegetarian kind of, like trying to make it how Thanksgiving and Christmas food is, but vegetarian. But it just, and I'm not vegetarian, but it just, everything, like my senses were in such a place that I was experiencing everything differently. And then I started kind of crashing and I started getting tired. So I didn't stay for the second half. I just went ahead and went home. I was still recovering from surgery too. So maybe that's why I was really anemic actually. And then over the weeks that came after that, for about a month after that, that's when the story really goes into the miraculous. I remember sitting in so I was still moving around different friends' houses. So I kept living in different neighborhoods because like this friend would say, okay, you can stay here for a week. And then this friend would say, you can stay here for a week. So I was still moving around. So the next week I was staying in Oakland in a town called Rockridge at a friend's house there. And so one day I go to this restaurant there, and I remember I ordered fish tacos. Why I remember that, I don't know. Maybe it was the first time I ever had fish tacos. And so while they were making my taco, I was just sitting there looking out the window. And it was like the afternoon. You know how the afternoon light, sometimes it reflects against glass? So you can see out, but anyone on the street, they just see their own reflection because of how the sun is, right? So that was the time of day. That was what was going on. So I'm just sitting there watching people walk down the street. And I would see the person, and it was like kind of like, I guess I could say I could see their aura, like how I think about aura and what I was experiencing. I don't actually think of it together, but that's the closest I can come up with for a word for it. So it's like I could see the aura, and I could see their belief in what was wrong with them. One person was depressed. Another person was physically sick. Another person was very, very nervous, very frightened, very worried, right? That each of them had kind of that energetic story around them of their belief system of what was wrong with them. But I could also see the truth of their perfection. And I could tell what was true and what was false. And the power of my knowing what was true obliterated what was false. It was gone. And each one of them would stop as soon as that would happen. They would turn and they would look at me, but they would only see their own reflection because of the light. And then they would turn back and keep going down the street, but you could see they were just absolutely changed. Like the person who had been kind of like this suddenly relaxed. The person who had been depressed suddenly perked up. The person who had been sick, who was now well, was free of pain. suddenly just like it released his body. I can't even remember if that was a man or a woman. Actually, I know some were men, some were women. As they walked down the street, just one person after another, I could heal them, whether it was a physical or emotional, psychological, didn't matter. The difference between their belief in their imperfection and my knowing of their perfection could not coexist. And the power of my knowing was more powerful than their belief. Gone. So that was the first clue that something had happened. Then I left there and I went across the street to a supermarket to get some food for later that day, right? And I go into the supermarket and suddenly the whole place goes hush. Like, gone. And I'm just kind of walking around and people come up to me, oh, can I help you? And they're so happy and they want to help me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm looking for some cereal. I'm looking for this. And so, yeah, the guy's like taking me around. He's like my personal shopper. He took me around the whole store for every single thing I needed. And then I got to the ground. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Sarisa. So I finally get to the cashier and everything. And again, like everywhere I would come near, it would just, everyone would go completely silent. But then everybody would just be smiling so broadly. They were just like beaming. They were so happy. And I was not having that experience. I was just I was actually a little detached in a way. Like, it's hard to describe it. I felt a little disembodied, to tell you the truth. That's not the right word either. I don't know what you call how I was feeling. It was not a normal state of how I felt. That's all I can say, right? I didn't feel like me. So I could observe all this happening, but I wasn't really invested in any of it. I didn't care so much what was happening. I just was aware of it, right? And so these people were obviously having like an experience as if they were in the presence of a very powerful holy person, although I was not one. Right? I'd spent the last 10 years of my life being an absolutely miserable, unhappy human being, right? That nothing ever worked right for. So the fact that they were having this experience didn't say anything to me about who I was. It didn't change any of that. It was just like, okay, well, this is happening now. So anyway, I left the supermarket. And as soon as I got outside the door, whoosh, they burst out chit, chat again, all over again. It was like so much noise behind me. And I just went back to my friend's house. And then some days after that, just a few days after that, I found myself at a different friend's house back in San Francisco. And this friend, he lived within a few blocks of Golden Gate Park. You might actually know him. He's a comic. His name is Keith Knight. He does the K Chronicles. And I was staying at his place, and he was right across from Golden Gate Park at that time. So one day, again, everybody's always off someplace, leaving me totally alone. So I'm trying to keep myself busy, So I go to the park one day, and for the first time, I was able to communicate with trees. Turns out they're somebody. They are somebody. Just like you have a dog. Your dog is somebody, right? You have a cat. Your cat is somebody. They're not human. They're dog, they're cat. Well, same thing. The trees are somebody. And not only that, but the difference between a pine tree and, say, a eucalyptus tree is just like the difference between a dog and a cat. Right? They're not just tree. Pine trees have this energy that's kind of like a mother's love. Like the just pine trees. Oh my God, if one day I could live in a pine forest, I would be so happy. I have a lot of trees around me here, but I don't have any pine trees. Just what happens, and that's my favorite tree. It hadn't been my favorite tree. Like if you talk about wood, I think pine wood is some of the cheapest wood, right? But the tree, who it is, the being of it. It's just like no offense to those of you who like cats, but I prefer dogs. Okay? I love dogs. I love every dog unless it's a mean dog. Just by default, I love every dog, okay? I just love them. And in that same way, I particularly resonate with the energy of pine trees, like just the way that warmth embrace of them, just how much they love us, just how much they give their love to us, how much they pour it out. It's like how a mother loves their child. It's just such a beautiful thing. And so I spent some time with the pine trees. And then I went over to the eucalyptus trees. Eucalyptus had a totally different energy. It's more of a kind of a father energy in a way, but it's like this cleansing energy. Like when I got up, I wound up climbing up into the eucalyptus tree, and I just started crying. And I wasn't sad, but it's just like I felt like a lot of stuff was just draining off of me, of like just years of stuff was just leaving me, and that the tree was just taking it from me, right? And it wasn't hurting the tree at all. Like they're so grounded that they're like an infinite capacity to give and receive with us, and they want to heal us. And the eucalyptus was just this very clean energy of purification. And not passionate in any kind of a way. There wasn't really an emotion to it. It was simply a function. It was its function, and it was simply fulfilling its function. And I could go on, like the different trees, like I don't actually know the names of all the trees that I came across, but they had different energies. And so anyway, life went on, life continued to be crazy and amazing with all this stuff happening until I got to about the month mark. And remember I had said before that, I wasn't really taking any of this personally. It was just what was happening, and I was aware of it happening, but that was about it. At somewhere around 3 to 4 weeks, I started liking it. I started liking the idea that I would walk into a room and everyone would react the way they would. I started liking the idea that I could heal people by looking at them. So I started going out explicitly with the intent of sitting in a restaurant and doing that. And let me tell you, it did not take long before I hit that point, before it all turned on me. Oh my God. One of those restaurants I in, oh my God. I'm lucky they didn't run me out of there with pitchforks. The whole room turned against me. Like you could tell everybody in there suddenly hated me. And in retrospect, I understand what was happening. It was like my energy was so powerful that other people could feel it. And while I was being in a place of just like the trees, they just give, right? It's just their nature. And that's kind of how I was being too. It was just happening, right? But as soon as I got to that point where I started trying to manipulate it, what I didn't understand is even though I wanted to do it to benefit them, all that was happening energetically was manipulation. And guess what? People don't actually like being manipulated, even for their own good. They don't like it. And so if they feel you doing it, they don't like you. And they hated me. Like literally around the room, people were looking at me and seething at me. I just like got up and left. I'm like, I'm not healing any of these people. But within a day, it was gone completely. The energy was completely gone, or at least gone to a level where it was no longer perceptive. I probably integrated some of it, like probably some of it just became the new me. But anything where I felt an altered sense of reality or altered relationship with others, that was gone. So that's a story in and of itself, but that is not actually the point of this story. This story gets much, much heavier now. So I hope you'll hang in there with me. Kima says, maybe that's what I am experiencing. Okay, so I want to talk to you more about that later, Kima. And Kima, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, write it out for me phonetically, if you will. So anyway, that's not the point of the story. This story gets a lot more serious. So hang on, all right? Like that I did not take 20 years to process. What I'm about to tell you now is what it took me 20 years to process. So you get like how powerful those shoes, touching those shoes had that effect. Turns out those shoes were the shoes of a spiritual teacher, the teacher of the teacher I went to see. So remember I went to see the female saint. Her teacher was a man, and he had died 12 years before I touched those shoes. And those were his shoes. So he was so freaking powerful, so spiritually powerful, that 12 years after he last wore those shoes, the energy on the shoes was enough to do that to me for a month. Or it might have gone longer if I hadn't started grasping at it. That's power. Now that is undeniable spiritual power. And yet, this is the part that's hard. I later found out that that very same man was such a serial molester of children that he actually had his devotees, all the spiritual students around him, build him a special table and set up a special system of how children would be brought to him so that he could rape the children in a certain position. Now, I don't know that there is such a thing as good and evil. I can't understand things like that. I can be taught things and maybe I believe it or I don't, but do any of us know? All I can say is that if there is such a thing as evil, that's it. Like, there cannot be evil if that's not evil. So maybe there is no evil. Maybe there's no such thing as good or evil. I don't know. This unbelievable spiritual power that could bless me and bless so many others, actually heal people through me. 12 years after he died, and I didn't even touch him. I touched his shoe. And yet destroyed the lives of so many children and their families and their parents, who must have felt tremendous guilt for having brought their children there to this person, trusting him as a spiritual teacher. Reconcile that. It took me 20 years to reconcile that. And like I said, I spoke to many spiritual teachers about this. Like, how can this be? How is this possible? And in the end, what I have come to is this. No matter how much you advance with your spiritual practice, no matter how much spiritual power you have, no matter how much good you can do in this world using your spiritual achievement, good for yourself and good for anyone, everyone, that does not mean you will be good. And those who are good are not necessarily rewarded, and those who are bad are not necessarily punished. These ideas that I was raised with that said that, well, you know the teachings, right? I don't have to explain it to you. You were raised the same way, right? Be good, you'll be rewarded. Be bad, you'll be punished. The spiritual, the priest, the whatever spiritual leader, they're especially good. That's why they teach you how to be good. We're all taught that, aren't we? And it's not true. None of it's true. Not a single word of it is true. Here's what's true. You can develop your spiritual ability, but if you don't take responsibility yourself for developing your morality, you won't have any. You will simply have the power to hurt more people, and there will be nothing that stops you, and there will be nothing that punishes you. So you just have to make that choice. Who do you want to be? And take responsibility for it. And don't for a minute think that with great power, great harm cannot come out of you. Mother Teresa, there's a lot of people say good and bad things about her. People love her, people hate her. I don't know, but I tell you one thing that she said that made me love her. She said, one person asked her, why does she work so hard to help people that others don't care about at all? And her answer, I think, was just so legitimate. She said, because I know that there is both a Hitler and an angel inside of me. There is a Hitler and an angel inside of every single one of us. And we need to own that. Because if we deny it, then as we do these spiritual practices that we've been talking about these last 10 weeks together, our power grows and our morality does not keep pace. And we become very, very, very dangerous. And we become something that I don't think we truly want to be. I don't think there's a punishment from outside ourselves, but I need to believe, honestly, I need to believe that there's some kind of accountability within us. There's the sociopath. Okay, I don't know about them. But for those of us who are not sociopaths, okay, which is the vast majority of us, I have to believe that we actually kind of hold ourselves back a little bit in a way of our power. And part of it is that we don't want to do harm. We don't really want to outgrow our moral capacity and our moral maturity. And so somehow, I don't have an absolute answer for you about what you do about this. I'm even still trying to figure out what I do with it, right? But I know that I want to have that ability again. Will it take that exact form of looking at people and being able to heal them and talking to trees and stuff? That I don't know. I would like it to not take the form where I walk into a supermarket and everybody starts acting crazy, though. That I'm not so keen on. But some aspects of it, I would love that to be a normal part of my life. But I know how important it is. Like right now, astrologically, this week, those of you who get the Thriving Reports on Sundays, you'll know that I wrote this to you guys on Sunday night. This week there's a tremendous amount of astral support for our learning how to love people who we consider to be unlovable. There are a lot of people in Washington right now that I would put on that list, okay? And not just in Washington. There are a lot of people who put those people in Washington who I would put on that list. And yet to try to find that capacity within me to love, not even wish to see them punished. This is important because if I get to a power level where I can alter somebody else's physical as well as emotional and psychological experience just with my vision, what happens when my vision is hateful? What happens when my vision is judging and punishing and vengeful? Which is the God I was raised to praise. A vengeful God, a judging God, a condemning God, a damning God. What happens if I take that on when I grow to that power? What am I putting out into this world? Not something that I want to put out, I'll tell you that. And so this week is especially a good week about learning how to address this in ourselves and learning how to love those who are hard to love. Those who don't love us back. Now, at a deep level, they do. At a deep level, they do love us. But there's so many layers between that and where they're actually living and how they can actually offer themselves to us that we might as well just say, look, they can be lost in fear and hate, and they can even be an actual physical danger to us at some level, you know, if we were actually in the same room with them, which we don't need to ever be. But the capacity to reach into all the reasons that you have that could justify you in being hateful and judging and condemning, but choose not to. That is the capacity in yourself that you have to develop if you are going to step into your spiritual power and be a force of good in this world, not a force of harm. That's the challenge. And I hope that you will take on both challenges. I hope that you will challenge yourself to love more and to love with the same abandon as those trees who love the fucking neo-Nazi with tattoos just as much as me. I hope that you can step into that challenge. And I know that it is a challenge and that you won't take it all in with one bite. And I hope that you can also step into the challenge of being ready to grow your spiritual power, which is really just about surrendering to the truth, being willing to be with the truth, being willing to be with things as they truly are, not as you've been taught they are. Are you willing to just experience the world and yourself in that world in a bigger vision of who you truly are? Are you willing to stop pretending that you are something less than who you are? So that's the other challenge. And I invite you from my heart to your heart to find that within you that blows your mind, right? Let the mind go and come into the mind within your heart where your wisdom and your truth truly lie and become a part of the healing of this world with me, with all of us. Not saints, not perfect people, thoroughly fallible, and at the same time thoroughly responsible for who we become and the effect that we have. I think that we can do it. And I think that if we support each other, wow, what can't we do? Like seriously, what can't we do if we can support each other in stepping into that? This world, I know right now, it can seem like there's a lot of bad going on. Hate is rising. Conflict, division, it's rising. You're not wrong in perceiving that. People are being less tolerant. People are separating more. People are being more openly condemning just because someone is different from them, where before they would at least try to hide it. And yet, we can to say that we can turn that around is like such an understatement that it's laughable. We can heal that with our vision. We can see a different truth so clearly and with such pure knowing of what is true that it wipes all that away. We can do that. But before we let ourselves do that, we have to come into our love. Or what do we have to give? Anyway. It's a hard story to tell. So anyway, I hope that you can do that, something with that. I hope you can apply it in some way that's useful to you. And I hope that you find it inspiring. As much as I know there's an aspect of it that's a little chilling also. Like I said, it took me 20 years to come to peace with it. But I hope that you find the encouragement within what's true, even if it means having to let go of some other truths that were comforting. Lose your innocence is what I was told. Oh, that's a very good way of saying that, Kima. Yeah, that's a very good way of saying that. Yeah. One spiritual teacher, actually, he told me point blank that the path of enlightenment is the path of disillusionment. You have to let go of all your illusions, especially your illusions about the realm of spirit, especially those illusions. The illusions about the teachers, the illusions about good and bad, the illusions about who we are. If we're all aspects of the divine, who is there to judge us but ourselves? Come on, let's stop pretending. All that is in us, which means all the potential of all the beauty and ugliness we see in this world is, of course, within us. And only we get to choose which of that we bring forth. Of course, that's how it is. How could it be different if we truly believe that we are an aspect of the divine given form? If we truly believe that, how could it logically be any other way then? Stepping into that, oh man, it's a lot to step into. Even having lived in it for a while, I still don't live in it now. And the only reason I don't is because I'm afraid to. That's it. There's no other reason. It's completely accessible to me. I'm afraid to be that person. But I'm committed to learning to not be afraid and to allowing myself to be that person. And I know that the path to that is the path of love. I have to expand my capacity to love all that is, just as it is, so that I'm able to transform it into something even better through love. That's the path. Yeah. All right. Well, I am going to peace out. It's getting so dark. My